Okay, and we are back. Welcome back to the Dark Zone Live presents Lizzie Borden Murder House. I am here on this side, and Susan Slaughter is actually over in Fall River, Massachusetts at the Lizzie Borden B&B. Hello, Susan.
Hey, Jay.
How
I wish you were here with me. I can't believe you're not here with me. Usually when we work together, you're always producing in field. So this is kind of awkward corresponding to you from afar. But I guess, you know what? Hey, COVID keeps people away from each other.
Yeah, I haven't really seen anybody other than my family since March, really, for the most part. We've been working together, and Kathleen and I have been working very closely together without seeing each other. I haven't seen Kathleen maybe all year, to be honest. You know, it's a little crazy.
I met Kathleen once for probably 3 minutes, like almost 3 years ago, and that was it. And then we've just been corresponding since.
Well, Kathleen, in truth, doesn't really exist. She's a persona that I adopted some time ago so that I can be good cop, bad cop all by myself. I'm really good at, like, on phone calls, doing the voices and switching back and forth, right?
I just think she's AI at this point.
Yes, she's AI, and we'll just leave it at that, okay? So for all you guys watching, we are moving forward with today's theme of alternate theories and alternate suspects. We just learned a lot of really interesting stuff from Rich Little, who was pointing his finger squarely at Uncle John Morris. We now have our next guest ready to go, and this is Kimbra Eberly.
Hi, Kimbra.
Hi, Kimbra. How you doing? I cannot hear Kimbra.
I can hear you.
You can't hear me?
Hi, Kimbra.
Oh, there we go.
We're trying again.
Okay.
Now
I
we can hear you. There you go. Technology.
Nice to meet you.
All right. Nice to meet you. And you have just written a book that hasn't been released yet, right? Tell us about your book.
Yes, and it's called Inadmissible, The Case of Lizzie Borden and Other Murderous Women. And it will be coming out, I'm hoping, in mid-October. The reason it got put back is because I made a quick trip to Maplecroft, and I wanted to write about it. So it got pushed back just a little bit, yeah.
So it's interesting because a lot of the people, the authors who have written about this particular crime and the case and the trial and everything, actually have made the journey to the location, both the B&B and Maplecroft, and I'm curious to know how that trip, what kind of impressions you got, and how that trip affected your story.
Okay, so first of all, I'm hoping you can give me 5 minutes at the end of this to talk about a paranormal experience I had at the murder house.
Everybody's going to want to hear that. Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
so
everybody's going to want to hear that.
I've been to the bed and breakfast.
But let's. I'm sorry. It's the delay is just so weird. I'm sure everybody's like getting mad at me for talking over you. But basically, let's focus on the true crime and the book that you wrote and everything. And yeah, at the end, let's talk about the paranormal.
Okay, great. So, my book is about other murderous women too, of the Victorian era. So I basically correlate those stories with the Lizzie Borden story. And the theme that runs throughout the book is women of that time period in the Victorian era and the suffrage movement of women and their rights they had. So men had control, the judges, the jury, the lawyers were all men. So they were in control, really, when you think about it. And even Jose Knowlton, the prosecuting attorney, wrote a letter to the lawyers saying he wanted to personally get rid of the case in fear that his own feelings would influence his judgment because he felt that he wouldn't be able to bring a case of guilty against Lizzie Borden. So that's where it started for me. So in looking at all of this, and by the way, the Borden house did have some conveniences. Rich Little was right. I'm a fact checker. So I check everything.
I love that.
Over and over and over. And he's right. They did have water in the house.
Okay. So, I don't know where I got that from. I think I got that from somebody from yesterday. But, one of the things that we definitely want to talk to you about, and you've got a lot of information, is the stuff that did not make it into the trial, the stuff that not only that was inadmissible, but other things that were found later, things that we've learned since. You've got a bunch of things. I don't know if you saw the video that we put together that you're in, but there was the second hatchet, there was the second apron, there was all kinds of stuff that you bring up. Please tell the audience all of that stuff. I'm going to be just sitting here listening to you, with bated breath. I want to know everything.
Okay, so the first thing that wasn't included in the trial is the inquest testimony, which if it was put in the trial, it would have incriminated Lizzie. She incriminated herself basically with the inquest testimony. If you read through it, she's changed her story so many times. And the only reason we have that testimony is because the Bedford a newspaper put their own stenographer in the courtroom to record it. So that's the only reason we have that testimony, or we would have never knew about it. So the inquest testimony was left out of the trial. A robbery that took place in the house in June of 1891 was also left out, which most people thought when they investigated it that Lizzie actually robbed the house herself. And Andrew at that time said, well, we know who the thief is, so you don't need to investigate it anymore. And at that point is when he put locks on all the doors in the house, even the one going through the bedroom between Andrew and Lizzie's room. So it made the house really difficult. It divided the house. Basically, the girls were in the front and Abby and Andrew were in the back of the house. So that was left out of the trial. And also, of course, we all know the prussic acid was left out of the trial. And the reason is because it wasn't the same type of murder weapon. And also, she didn't purchase it. So it was just thrown out. Also, inadmissible was the testimony with her cousin Anna Borden, who was a very wealthy cousin who lived up on the hill, and she went on a grand tour with her and shared a cabin for 4 months. And when Lizzie returned from that trip, she was so saddened, and she said she regretted the necessity of returning home after she had spent a happy summer because her home, meaning the Borden house, was such an unhappy home. So she did not want to go home, and she enjoyed the traveling of a wealthy woman. So I want to say those are
and the family did have the means, for her to travel like that, and that's why I was wondering about the theft. It's like she stole money from her own house. They had money, and and even in a couple of the films, it's depicted that she goes and she shoplifts at a store. So it's like it's to me, it's either like Andrew was such a penny pincher that he wasn't giving anybody in the house any money, and she didn't have any money to do what she needed to do, or they had the money, she had money, but she had some mental illness where she was a kleptomaniac or something, and she had to do these things. I don't know. What is your take on that?
Well,
Susan, you've got a question there.
Yeah. It's fine.
Yeah.
No, go ahead. No, I
Well,
was hearing here the whole thing about the theft that happened, and tell me if this is correct. But they were saying that they thought it was an inside job, yes, but that also Mr. Borden had to go around town and tell the shop owners, please don't arrest my daughter for shoplifting, like just let her take it and keep tabs and let me know and I'll settle with you at the end. So it was rumored that, yeah, she was a klepto and that she had tabs all around town from all the little items and things she would steal. But also in the Times, even though she had like a $400 a month, sorry, my connection was lost. Right here. I just lost connection. Fuck. Why does this happen?
So Susan is absolutely correct in saying that Mr. Borden the store owners kept tabs and Mr. Borden paid her bill. That's absolutely true. And when you think about it, kleptomania is... It's not because you need something. It's because you want to do something, because you want it. It's not because you need it. Lizzie, the girls didn't need money. They had a hefty allowance that Mr. Borden gave the girls and Mrs. Borden every year. They had an allowance. Actually, the girls were really spoiled. And that's why I wanted to look into the personality aspect of it. They were really spoiled. They could come and go as they please. Basically, they did nothing except clean their room, and then they went out and did their activities. But yes, Lizzie was a kleptomaniac, and it was known in the town. And even when she moved into Maplecroft, there were some questions about some crazy things being stolen. And I don't really want to get into that because the case is so complex and there's so many little nooks and crannies. But anyway, if you take a deep dive into women at that time, they had no legal rights at all. The 19th Amendment wasn't passed until 1920, which gave women the right to vote. And in 1851, there was a short victory with a resolution of the women's suffrage movement, which shifted the society towards a greater freedom for women. But still, if they got married, all of their money, every possession that they had, even their body, was owned by their husband. They got all of that. So what I was saying, when Lizzie was with her friend Anna on that grand tour for 4 months, Anna did not marry either. So I'm sure these ladies had conversations about that, what their future would be like. And Lizzie, for sure, I don't think she would, she didn't marry, neither did Emma. So it makes you wonder.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Susan, did you have another
thought?
I'm
back. Yeah, so I lost connection for a second, but I love the angle that you're going with this because I do believe, like you said, there's so many nooks and crannies. Let's not focus on the klepto thing, but it goes to show you that she likes to take a little bit of risk and she likes a little bit of excitement, and she's kind of a free thinker, and she was also known to be a bit of a feminist.
Oh, yeah, she belonged to a lot of clubs. She actually belonged to the Women's Christian Temperance Union. She belonged to the Women's Union Club, which they were established for the welfare of women to become independent. And the reason the book cover is like that, it makes her a superhero in a way, because she was for all of that. She was for all of that. And she had a lot of friends, even her cousin, Grace Howe, who was a socialite and an activist. Her husband, McHenry Howe, was the private secretary to Franklin D. Roosevelt. So you can understand, like Lizzie and where she was at that time. So if you understand, she had all of these friends and the women's suffrage movement, the Women's Christian Temperance Union. What is interesting and why she, you have to ask why she never really fit in with that elite society. and they never invited her to the big party. She never got invitations, because from her childhood, and this story has many parallels, from her childhood on, she was called peculiar. Her friends said she was miserable. She acted in strange ways, and we always try to figure that out. What is that? So science was nearly non-existent around that time. So abnormal behaviors were judged through the lens of religion. So if you look peculiar people up, the definition, it's a term adopted by a fundamentalist Christian sects, signify their refusal to conform to any rule or conduct that is contrary to the Bible, the spirit of the Bible. So, in Lizzie being peculiar, she was a rebel. She was really a rebel. Yeah.
I 100% agree with you on that. I've been hearing about the way she acted in the trials and just people. I mean, this is all word of mouth testimony too, and people's observations. But a lot of these observations, like you're saying, are based off of Christian observation, And so, yeah, you're right. She is a nonconformist. And even later on in life, you visited Maplecroft, and she wasn't even accepted after the trials by, the Christian, the women's Christian society that she was in. She was kind of like excommunicated out of that. And then she just like, well, whatever. If no one's good. Yeah, she was like, I'm just going to do me. And then she started hanging out with actors.
Well, it's funny because she was ostracized. She was ostracized by the same people that supported her during the trial.
Yes.
Right?
Yes,
during the trial, they were supporting her, and then afterwards, she was shunned by those people.
Yep.
Well, there were reasons behind that, especially with the women's Christian temperance movement. I think they rented a space out in the Borden building, the A.J. Borden building, which Lizzie inherited. And something about the rent or something, they had a dispute with. You could ask one of the historians. But anyway, getting back to lifelong friends. Women back then created a pact of friendship, and it was both social and emotional. Basically, it would be really difficult for a woman to break a friendship bond. In other words, like if Alice Russell or Mrs. Churchill saw something, they would never break that pact in order to implement Lizzie. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, do you think that has something to do with the psychology of women kind of being like, Lizzie did something I didn't have the guts to do? Because all these women were so repressed at the time and, like you said, owned in every aspect. And so maybe they just saw her do something that they didn't, like I said, have the guts to do.
Well, maybe they didn't want to be a part of it either, because Mrs. Churchill said she was afraid. She said she saw something in the house, even if you rip her tongue out, she would never say. So, maybe. So, like certain factors too in Lizzie's general state of mind, she clearly wanted to be among the elite, but she found herself trapped in her father's rules, under her father's rules. And, another thing is she probably had trouble fitting in because of her moods. So it probably created a real frustration. And Lizzie, she was she collected books over the years. She had an eclectic book collection, which by today's standards is worth about $20,000. Her book collection. So she read.
Are those actual books that are in her? Are those books the actual books that are at Maplecroft?
Some of them, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, she had a large library.
Let me ask. So you have this book, and it's not just about Lizzie. It's about other women who have done, heinous acts. So is there any correlation with other women that you see? Like, do you see a pattern with women? Because you said that specifically you're writing about women within a certain era. So can you tell us a little bit more about the other women that you write about in your book?
Sure. Throughout the book, I probably have maybe about 12 other women mentioned in this book, some devoting full chapters to, starting back in the 1500s. But the correlations are more like they had peculiar ways. Things like I want to say, let me think about this. The case of Mary Harris, who she killed her husband and then got off. She shot a man and killed him, and the lawyers attributed to it as a uterine dysfunction. And for the first time in courts, they used that as a defense for the trial. They said that the uterine irritation always affects the nervous system. In some instances, it develops into insanity, bringing up mental frailty in women. So the lawyers, and the correlations I use are different cases of women who got off for, this case with menstruation. And they didn't bring it up in the trial, the menstruation thing, because they thought about the defense, but with the peculiar spells, and they wanted to use it, but it would have opened up a whole can of worms. But it was used in other defenses. And listen to this: in 1867, the conditions listed in the U.S. Congress that predisposed women to mental illness included pregnancy, lactation, menstrual periods, women's problems, and the connection between the uterus and the brain is so intimate that the occurrence absolutely normal instruction is attendant with great risk in many unstable brains. In other words, if you were menstruating, you could be nuts and put in an asylum or a workhouse back then. So many women
Wait a minute. So you're saying that that's not true?
That's nutty.
What?
This is not true.
Jay, it's not true. It's
You're
not
so
true.
funny.
If it were true, Jay, I'd be going crazy right now.
Well, wait a minute. My wife had 2 kids, and I can guarantee you that she got crazy during childbirth. I'm lucky to be here. Trust me.
So, that's funny. So there's.
But hey, I'm sorry,
let's just talk
Kimber,
testosterone problems now.
We got about 15 minutes left with you, or a little less. Let's get back to some of the things that are anomalies with the case and things that people don't know, like the apron, the hatchet. Tell us about that stuff.
Okay, so they did find a hatchet on the Crow's barn roof behind the Borden house, right over the fence. And
when was this? What's the time? The relation of time?
This was during I want to say during the trial at some time. I don't know the exact date. I could look it up for you and then send it. You could shout it out later. It was reported in June 15th. So I think it was during the trial.
So we've got a graphic up right now, and if the audience can see it, you see on the map, number 18 is the house. It's the A.J. Borden, it says on there, and it's that is what is currently the B&B. Okay, and then so you can see the property line where there was a fence, and there's a little X on the building right next door, and that's where this second hatchet was found. That's a rooftop on like a section of barn or something, right?
Yes, it is a roof of a barn. They found it on. A paper boy found it, actually. He was riding his bike and saw it up there, and it was reported in a bunch of newspapers. So Freddie Potter was his name, and he was playing ball on 3rd Street and then noticed the hatchet. He got it, and he took it into the defense attorney. So what happened? No, he took it into. I think he gave it to Jose Knowlton. Was it the prosecution? Anyway, it had the hatchet Yeah, he took it into the prosecution, and they decided that they didn't want to introduce it into evidence at the time because it would change the course of the trial, and it would have been an embarrassment because they didn't do their search like thoroughly. So
Wow.
what was interesting about the hatchet is it contained a metal on it called gilt, which is, you could see it with the naked eye. It's like that shiny, sparkly, metally stuff. And they found it on in the autopsy on a cut in Mrs. Borden's head, meaning that the hatchet that they had in court wasn't the correct one, because gilt is.
So I've seen that. Like if you buy if you buy a set of new tools, it's like that very silvery kind of almost like chrome like like garbage on there, right?
It's from a new hatchet, right? So they had this, and at the end of my book, I have the last chapter is called "Oh, come on, she did it," and it's my whole. I go through the whole thing in detail of how I feel that Lizzie Borden did it, and I feel that the hatchet on that barn is the hatchet that she used. And it went
you think it, so it went missing after the fact. Do you think that the hatchet that was turned over that is currently on display, it may be similar, but that was a diversionary tactic?
Yes, it was not the hatchet. And let me tell you, they always say in crime scenes, follow the money, right? So Lizzie, so the court costs for the whole trial, with all the courts, the doctors, all the witnesses and stuff, that whole thing by today, the 2020 inflation calculator costs $323,000, right? Guess how much Lizzie paid her lawyers? Take a guess. By today's standards.
In today's standards, okay.
$7 million.
Let's say whoa, okay.
Whoa. Well, they were the dream team at that time, right? I mean, she had a former governor of the state was one of her attorneys.
But think about that. Things went missing, and I think even the apron, the way they buried the clothes the day after in a hole in the ground like stew. All that stuff was thrown in there. Why? Why didn't they find the Prince Albert coat, and his pants were missing too that Andrew wore? They were all missing. So who got rid of them? And I feel there was maybe a payoff somewhere to dispose of
100%.
Yeah.
I was also thinking that when you just gave me that. Yeah, when you gave me that number of today's $7 million is what she paid her defense attorneys. Who's to say that the defense attorneys, they realize they take this case because it's probably the most talked about case of the century, so it builds their profile. B, they're connected in the judicial system and they have money now. A lot of money to start paying people off so that they can win this in court, which also boosts their reputations as lawyers. So I'm starting to think all of this stuff. I mean, I have a theory that this is all judicially, and it's like a perfect storm of all these shady people, and then we just, that's what happened that bailed, her out of this whole mess.
I think you're absolutely correct, Susan. I'm right there with you. And one of the other things that was really striking to me, so I've been reading a lot of women's home journals back in the 1800s and sifting through paperwork. There was one woman, she was a remarkable woman, by the way, known, and I talk a lot in my book about many different women of the time. She was a founder of the women's temperance movement. And during the trial, her name was Mary Livermore. She was given permission to interview Lizzie when she was in Taunton jail. And it's the only interview that Lizzie ever gave. And it is astounding. I I just thought of OJ and the book, when he said he did it, because Lizzie, if I can just read you what she, like a little thing that she talked about.
Yes, please.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
She basically described if she. Okay, so I'll just read it to you, and then you can tell me what you think or what you feel like after hearing. Okay, so this is Lizzie talking to Mary Livermore. How can they think me guilty? What a fool I must have been if I committed the crime like that in broad daylight, with the certainty of detection, with people going to and fro on the street, and Bridget washing the windows and likely to come in for water at any minute, with my uncle visiting us and likely to be back at any time, with the curtains up and the neighbors astir. I knew every foot of that house. I could have walked all over it in the dark, sure of my way. Why, if I contemplated that crime, should I have not done it at night? 2 blows, as they lay asleep, no noise, no stir. I could have opened wide the street door, made evidence of a struggle in the room, and then with plenty of time removed myself all traces of blood, going quietly to bed. But they say I committed both crimes at noonday and removed myself all evidence of this horrible work. How can they believe that?
Wow.
Sounds like somebody who's thought about it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's just like,
Yeah.
Okay. So,
I know. I would have played way dumber than that if I was trying to get away with something. She sounded really calculated in general. I just feel that, that sounds really calculated. I mean, if anything, I was like, if anyone gets away with it in broad daylight, it's going to be someone that lives in the actual house. I'm sorry, lady.
yeah. And
Yep.
Coupled with her inquest testimony and, many of other things, I definitely come to the conclusion that she definitely was bold enough to pull it off. And I love the astrologer yesterday. He was fantastic. He was right on with, I think, Emma and Lizzie both. The way he described their personalities. So, yeah.
Well, Kimbra, we've got to move forward because we're running out of time. But that was I wish we could give you the rest of the day. That was fantastic. That was some really interesting and I think very insightful information for the audience. Stuff that we didn't know, we've not heard before. Susan, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed talking with you. And I also have to make mention, I really enjoy the art cover on your book that you chose.
Oh, yeah.
It's really kind of stirring and creepy.
Yeah. And those
Can we show that real fast? Can we show this?
I'll let
Aaron.
Aaron.
This book has not been released yet. When is this book coming out?
Hopefully, my editor's watching this, by the way. so hopefully, I want to say mid-October. But you can pre-order this book if you go to my website, sign up on a list, and it'll be on Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Kindle Read, and you can get ebook also. So.
All right.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Right. Thank you. Me too.
I'm going to be a customer. I'm going to be checking out your book. All right, Kimber. You have sorry, before we go away, real fast, if you can, tell us your paranormal thing, because the audience is going to want to hear this.
Oh, yeah. Well, I have a question for you exactly. I'll tell you the story, and then I want to ask you a question, because honestly, I'm a skeptic. Up until, I think it was the second time I visited the house, I was a skeptic. I didn't believe in ghosts, nothing, right? So, I'll try to condense this really quick. So before I was invited to be on a trial for the prosecution, 2 years in a row on a mock trial that Brian Cano, he's a guest of yours coming up later, he did a trigger event.
Yeah.
Right? So I was on the prosecution side of that. And before I went to the Borden house, I had a flat tire. I had these lights in my kitchen. They're like underneath the cabinets, and they have like these plastic caps on them. They kept popping off.
Right.
And it's never happened. I'm just sitting there, and they just popped off. 2 of them. It happened like 3 times. So then I throw in like all my stuff in the car. I drive to bed and breakfast. I get there, and the day before we're at a hotel, we're going to go sightsee. I drive 20 feet and my muffler falls off in my car. So I'm like, okay, this is so weird. So it's just trouble the whole way up. So the night that they're doing the investigation, they were all in the Abbey room, where Abby was murdered. And I'm out in the hallway sitting on the floor, and another guest and we hear a baby crying. And I thought it was so weird, and I yell in the room, "Hey, Chris, did you hear that baby crying?" And he's like, "No." And it happened again right after I said that. So when he went back and he replayed the recordings, the baby crying was on the recording. It was 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm thinking, with the story with the woman next door in the well, that she threw her children down the well, that it could have possibly been like a baby crying, something like that. So that happened. Now I'm writing this book, and I'm on the last chapter. This is recently. I had just gotten back from Maplecroft, and I'm writing this last chapter. Lizzie did it. And do you know those things popped off my kitchen, the plastic things off the kitchen lights popped off again? And it's the only time it's ever popped off. Now, my question to you is, what the hell was that? Can ghosts travel? So, okay, that's really interesting because, listen, so every time we start talking about the prosecution, and even when I talk about it, so I have this device here, right? I'm going to show you, like, this is how I hear everyone in production, and every time I start talking about certain parts of the case or, like, about, when I talk about Lizzie and like, her mental dispositions or things like that, the microphone just shuts off on me every time. And then last night we did a Ouija session, and we were starting to get names of the judges and names of people on the case, and people that I hadn't heard stories of yet. And so as soon as we started getting the names of these judges, the planchette was going towards goodbye, like if it wouldn't want to spell anything else, spell any more information for us. And then all of a sudden, all of our systems crash right behind it, and we lose LA, we lose our live feeds, and like it was. We've been having issues like that where it's just like, like things just kind of falling apart, or just, it's technical difficulties here. I mean, we try to streamline it as best as we can, but the second we start talking about certain aspects of the case, then things go haywire. Do you think
right? Well, yesterday Jerry Pacheco was talking to us about how he tries to do work in the house. He's the guy that maintains all of the internet there and everything, and he's the property manager and all that. When he does work in the house, putting up cameras and stuff, like nothing will work unless he tells Andrew Borden specifically, "Hey, this is what I'm doing. Please be cool with it. I mean no disrespect." And then he can get his work done. So it's interesting.
So one more quick thing before I go. Every time I'm in the bed and breakfast, I've been there like 5 times. As soon as I walk in the door, I always feel like a heaviness in the house. Like, just, I don't know if it's because my mind is psyching me out, but I always feel a heaviness.
Right.
So when I went to Maplecroft and everybody's saying, "Oh, it's going to be this light and fluffy area, place, beautiful and stuff," I felt a very incredible sadness there. Like, it wasn't like the pleasantries that I was told. I felt genuine sadness, and and the first thing that came to my mind was, money can't buy you happiness. No matter what, Lizzie was still sad in the house.
Yeah, I think that you might have picked up on something there, because I think she started hanging out with fun folks, after she'd been ostracized by her entire community. People just kind of disowned her. So yeah, she probably got all this money. She finally moved into her dream house. She's living in the neighborhood she wants to live in, but now she's all alone. And then when people have such a loneliness to themselves, even her sister Emma left. She couldn't handle living with Lizzie. So she was by herself.
They were really tight, right? And if they actually had colluded with each other for these homicides, they were very tight, and then for her to leave her in the end, and they both kind of died alone, 6 days apart or something like that.
Yeah, very sad. Very
absolutely.
Sad. I mean, I think her friends were the servants. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, Kimbra, thank you so much for coming. We've got our next guest up on deck. Hey, everybody, when this book comes out, you have to check it out. You have to get it. Go to Kimbra's website, pre-order, and get the book. Thanks, Kimbra. Thank you for coming on board and telling the audience.
Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye. Okay, Dark Zoners. We have our next guest on deck. You've met him before. He was part of our Conjuring event, and this is one of our favorite historians in the world, who is also a paranormal researcher. His name is James Martin, and he's coming to us all the way from England. Hello, James Martin.
Hello, pleasure to be back with you. I'm actually calling you from southern France at the moment. So good afternoon.
It was the same.
It
was the same last time.
Yes.
Actually, it was the same last time, right? Yeah. Okay, your accent is confusing me. That's why I think you're coming from England. All right.